Don't worry, Avery. He's my husband, not yours. Sloane said it with a smile. Avery stopped at the bedroom doorway, her hand still wrapped around the house key she had given Sloane 3 weeks earlier. For a second, she couldn't understand what she was seeing. The woman standing beside Caleb was the same woman Avery had invited into her home after she had nowhere else to sleep. The same woman whose clothes Avery had folded, whose groceries she had paid for, whose late-night tears she had listened to on the couch. And now Sloane was standing in Avery's bedroom, looking at her as if Avery were the stranger who had walked into the wrong house. Caleb said nothing. That silence hurt more than any explanation could have. Avery looked at him, waiting for the familiar panic, the apology, anything that might tell her this was some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, Caleb slowly lowered his eyes. Avery. Her name came out quietly, almost carefully. How long? She asked. Sloane crossed her arms. Does it really matter? Avery felt her throat tighten. She had driven home early that night because the client dinner had ended sooner than expected. On the way home, she had even stopped at a grocery store because Sloane had mentioned she was craving the lemon cookies Avery always bought. She had been thinking about her friend when she opened the front door, thinking about whether Sloane needed anything else, thinking about how grateful she was that she could help someone she loved. Then she heard laughter upstairs. Caleb's laughter. At first, she had smiled. She thought maybe he had come home early too. Then she heard Sloane's voice. Avery climbed the stairs slowly, one hand sliding along the railing. The bedroom door was open just enough for her to see them. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't even cry. She simply stood there, trying to fit the picture in front of her with the life she thought she knew. You told me she was staying in the guest room, Avery said. Caleb finally looked at her. I know. 2 words. Nothing more. Avery glanced toward the hallway. The guest room door was still open. Her neatly folded towels were inside. A fresh blanket sat at the foot of the bed. Everything she had done for Sloane suddenly looked different. Not kindness. Not friendship. An invitation she wished she had never made. I trusted you, Avery whispered. Sloane gave a small shrug. People change. Avery looked at her best friend for a long moment. Then she looked at her husband. Her hands were trembling, but her voice wasn't. You're right. She reached into her purse and took out her phone. Caleb's expression changed. Avery, what are you doing? She looked at the 2 people she had trusted most and quietly said, I'm listening. Then she stepped backward, closed the door, and walked down the stairs without giving either of them the reaction they expected. What Caleb didn't know was that Avery wasn't walking away because she had nothing left to say. She was walking away because, for the first time in her marriage, she needed to hear everything before she said anything at all. By the time Avery reached her car, her hands were still shaking. She sat behind the wheel without starting the engine, staring through the windshield at the quiet street she had driven down almost every night for 6 years. Upstairs, Caleb was still in the bedroom with Sloane. Her husband. Her best friend. 2 people she had trusted without question. Avery pressed her palms against the steering wheel and took a slow breath. She wanted to call Danielle. She wanted to call her mother. She wanted to drive back upstairs and demand every answer at once. Instead, she opened her phone. The screen showed 2:19 a.m. She created a new note and typed 3 words. What do I know? Then she began writing. Sloane moved in 3 weeks ago. Caleb knew. Sloane had a key. Caleb had changed his phone password 2 months ago. He had started coming home late. He had stopped answering simple questions. Avery stared at the list. None of those things had felt important when they happened. Together, they looked different. She remembered the night Sloane arrived with 2 suitcases and red eyes. I swear I will not stay long, Sloane had said. Avery had hugged her. Stay as long as you need. Caleb had stood behind them, quiet. Avery had noticed his hesitation, but she had assumed he was worried about money and space. Now she wondered if that hesitation had been something else. Her phone buzzed. A message from Caleb appeared. Where are you? Avery stared at it. Another message followed. We need to talk. She almost laughed. Talk. After what she had just seen, that was the word he chose. She typed a response, then deleted it. She typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, she turned the phone face down. She needed facts, not promises. At 2:47 a.m., Avery drove to a 24-hour coffee shop 6 miles from home. She ordered a regular coffee and sat in the corner near the window. The place was nearly empty. A delivery driver sat at the counter, and an older couple quietly shared a slice of pie. Avery opened her laptop. She checked the family calendar first, then the shared credit card, then the household account. Her heart sank when she found a charge she did not recognize. It was from a private restaurant downtown, dated 6 weeks earlier. The amount was $286.40. She checked the date again. That was the night Caleb had told her he was working late. Avery closed her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. One thing at a time." She kept looking. There were more charges. Rides across town. Hotel parking. A boutique she had never heard of. Then she found an email notification from a company called Harper Strategic Consulting. The payment had come from an account connected to Caleb's business expenses. Avery knew that name. Harper was Sloane's last name. Her stomach tightened. She opened the transaction details, but before she could read everything, another message appeared from Caleb. "Please come home. We can fix this." Avery stared at those words for a long moment. 6 years of marriage. 3 weeks of opening her home to the woman she considered family. And now he wanted to fix it before she even knew how much there was to uncover. Avery closed the laptop. She was not ready to go home. Not yet. She slipped the phone into her purse, picked up her coffee, and looked out at the empty street. She had spent years believing that trust meant giving someone the benefit of the doubt. Tonight, she was beginning to understand something different. Sometimes trust means believing what someone shows you, even when the truth hurts. And Avery had finally seen enough to know that what happened upstairs was not the beginning. It was only the first thing she had caught. Avery did not go home that night. By sunrise, she was sitting at her kitchen table with the curtains still closed, a mug of coffee growing cold beside her laptop. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Sloane standing in that bedroom, completely calm, as if Avery had interrupted something that belonged to her. At 7:12 a.m., the front door opened. Caleb walked in alone. He looked exhausted, but not ashamed. That detail stayed with Avery. He had spent the night knowing she had seen everything, yet somehow he still looked more annoyed than guilty. He stopped when he saw her. "You are here." Avery looked up from her coffee. "I live here." Caleb swallowed. "Avery, about last night." "How long?" she asked. He hesitated. "It was not what you think." Avery almost smiled. "Then tell me what I should think." Caleb pulled out a chair, but did not sit. Sloane was upset. "She has been going through a lot." Avery stared at him. "So you comforted her in our bedroom?" His face tightened. "That is not fair." "Fair?" Avery repeated quietly. "You want to talk about fair?" Caleb looked away. "I made a mistake." There it was. Not an explanation. Not the truth. A mistake. Avery took a sip of coffee and set the mug down. "How long has the mistake been happening?" Caleb said nothing. The silence answered for him. Avery watched him carefully. 6 weeks, she asked. His eyes moved toward hers for half a second. That was enough. 6 weeks. The restaurant charge. The late nights. The strange expense reports. All of it suddenly connected. "You told me you were working late," she said. "I was working." "And Sloane." Caleb rubbed his forehead. "Avery, please." "Was she there?" He did not answer. Avery nodded slowly. "Okay." Caleb stepped closer. "I never wanted this to happen." Avery looked at him. "That is not the same as saying you did not choose it." He had no answer. A few minutes later, Sloane came downstairs carrying a small bag. She looked embarrassed now, but Avery noticed something that bothered her even more. Sloane did not look surprised to see her sitting there. She looked prepared. "Avery," Sloane said softly. "I am sorry." Avery studied her face. "Are you?" Sloane's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you stay?" Sloane looked down. "I did not know where else to go." Avery remembered those exact words from 3 weeks earlier. She had believed them. She had opened the door because she thought friendship meant giving someone a safe place when life fell apart. Now she wondered if Sloane had been looking for more than a place to sleep. After they left the room, Avery went back to her laptop. She searched every transaction connected to Harper Strategic Consulting. The first payment had been 6 weeks earlier. The second had been 5 weeks earlier. The third had been 4 weeks earlier. Then she found something that made her stop breathing for a moment. The payments were not coming from Caleb's personal account. They were being listed as business consulting expenses through North Star Meridian Group. Avery knew enough about Caleb's company to understand what that meant. This was not simply about a marriage. Money was moving. Records were being created. Someone had taken their private betrayal and connected it to the business. Avery leaned back in her chair and stared at the screen. She had spent years trusting Caleb with every part of her life. Now she was looking at numbers and realizing that trust might have cost her more than her marriage. Her phone buzzed again. It was Danielle. Avery answered. "I need you," she said. Danielle's voice immediately changed. "What happened?" Avery looked at the screen, then at the empty hallway where Sloane's suitcase had stood only hours earlier. "I think this is bigger than cheating." Avery arrived at Danielle's office before 9 that morning, carrying the laptop she had barely touched since the night before. Danielle Brooks looked at her cousin for a long moment before saying anything. "You look like you have not slept." "I have not." Avery placed the laptop on the desk. "I found payments to Sloane's company. They are being recorded as consulting expenses through North Star Meridian Group." Danielle opened the laptop and studied the transactions. "How much?" Avery swallowed. "Almost $40,000 so far." Danielle looked up immediately. "Are you sure these are connected to Sloane?" Avery nodded. "Her company name is on every payment." Danielle leaned back. "Do you have access to the business records legally?" "The household account is shared. Caleb gave me access years ago. I am not breaking into anything." Danielle nodded. "Good. Then we stay inside what you are allowed to see. No guessing. No revenge. We document everything." Avery stared at the screen. "I do not even know what I am looking for anymore." "Then we start with what you do know." Danielle pulled a notepad toward herself. "You caught Caleb with Sloane. You found a pattern of payments. You know the payments started around the same time they became close. Now we find out whether there is anything else." Avery took a breath. "What if I am wrong?" Danielle gave her a steady look. "Then we will know. But if you are right, you do not want to warn them before you understand what they have been doing." That afternoon, Avery went home while Caleb was at work. Sloane had already taken her suitcase and left. The guest room looked almost normal again, except for one small detail. A spare house key was missing from the hook by the kitchen door. Avery stood there staring at the empty hook. She remembered handing that key to Sloane herself. "You will not have to keep knocking," she had said. Now the missing key felt like a warning. Avery went into Caleb's home office and checked the shared business files she had always been allowed to access. She found invoices, expense reports, and payment confirmations. Then one document caught her attention. It was a consulting agreement between North Star Meridian Group and Harper Strategic Consulting. The date was 6 weeks earlier. Avery opened it. The agreement described services that did not seem to exist. No detailed reports. No project schedule. No client meetings. Just a monthly payment and a broad description of advisory work. She printed the document and placed it beside her laptop. Then she heard the front door open. "Avery," Caleb called. Her heart jumped. She quickly closed the folder. Caleb walked into the office and stopped when he saw her. "What are you doing in here?" "Looking for something." His eyes moved to the printer. "What did you print?" Avery held his gaze. "Why?" Caleb took a step toward the desk, then stopped. "Because those are company documents." Avery slowly picked up the pages. "Then you should have no problem explaining them." His expression changed. Just for a second. But Avery saw it. "Explaining what?" he asked. She held up the first page. "Why North Star Meridian Group has been paying Sloane nearly $40,000 for work nobody can describe." Caleb went completely still. The silence between them felt different this time. Not like the silence after she caught him with Sloane. This was the silence of a man realizing that his wife had stopped asking emotional questions and started asking financial ones. "Avery," he said carefully, "you do not understand what you are looking at." She placed the papers back on the desk. "Then explain it." Caleb opened his mouth, but before he could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The color drained from his face. Avery noticed the caller name before he turned away. It was not Sloane. It was the chief financial officer of North Star Meridian Group. And Caleb did not answer. Caleb did not answer the call. He watched the screen until it stopped ringing, then placed the phone face down on the desk. Avery noticed the movement. That seemed important. Caleb forced a small smile. It was work. Your chief financial officer calling about a payment to Sloane's company? His expression tightened. You are making assumptions. Avery folded her arms. Then give me facts. Caleb looked at the papers again. Sloane did consulting work for the company. What kind? Marketing strategy. Avery picked up the agreement. There are no reports. The work was informal. There are no meeting records. Not everything gets documented. And $40,000 went to her company. Caleb sighed. It is a business expense. Avery stared at him. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to trust me. The words landed differently now. A week ago, they might have stopped her. Today, they almost made her smile. I did trust you, she said. That was the problem. Caleb looked away. His phone rang again. This time, he answered. Yes. Avery watched his face as he listened. He said almost nothing. I understand. Then he hung up. What did they want, she asked. Caleb picked up his jacket. There is an internal review. Avery's heart skipped. Of the payments? Of several expenses. And Sloane's company? Caleb paused. It is part of it. He started toward the door. Avery followed him. Caleb, are you in trouble? He stopped. For the first time since she had known him, she saw genuine uncertainty in his eyes. I do not know yet. Then he left. Avery stood alone in the office. She called Danielle immediately. He says there is an internal review. Danielle was quiet for a moment. That is not necessarily bad for you. It feels bad. For him, maybe. For you, it means someone else is looking at the records. Avery sat down. What should I do? Nothing impulsive. Keep copies of anything you are legally allowed to access. And do not tell Caleb everything you know. Avery looked at the printed agreement on the desk. I already feel like I am living with a stranger. Danielle's voice softened. Maybe you are finally seeing the person who was there all along. That evening, Caleb came home earlier than usual. He did not mention the review. He did not mention Sloane. He simply walked into the kitchen and asked, Have you eaten? Avery looked up from the counter. No. He opened the refrigerator. I can make something. She almost said yes. For one brief second, she remembered the man who used to cook breakfast on Sunday mornings and dance badly while waiting for coffee. Then she remembered the bedroom door. I am not hungry. Caleb closed the refrigerator. Avery, I know I messed up. She said nothing. I know you are hurt. Still nothing. But this thing with the company is separate. Avery looked at him. Is it? He frowned. What does that mean? Nothing. She picked up her phone. I am tired. Caleb watched her walk away. Are you leaving me? Avery stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Her heart was pounding, but her voice stayed calm. I have not decided. She went upstairs and closed the bedroom door. Then she opened her laptop and found an email from Danielle waiting for her. There was one sentence in the message. I found something about the Harper payments that you need to see before you make any decisions. Avery stared at the screen. Then another notification appeared. A file had been attached. The name of the file was not Sloane's name. It was Caleb's. And for the first time, Avery realized the affair might not be the biggest betrayal in her marriage. Avery stared at the attachment for several seconds before opening it. The file contained a series of payment records, internal messages, and one document that made her sit back in her chair. It was a transfer authorization signed by Caleb. The amount was $75,000. The recipient was Harper Strategic Consulting. But the date was 3 days before Sloane had ever told Avery she was struggling and needed a place to stay. Avery read the date again. 3 days. Before the suitcase. Before the tears. Before Sloane stood on Avery's porch and said, I do not know where else to go. Avery's stomach tightened. This had not started in her guest room. It had started before Sloane ever crossed the front door. She called Danielle. I opened it. I thought you might. The payments started before Sloane moved in. Danielle was quiet. There is more. Avery looked at the next page. What more? The company did not just pay Sloane. Caleb used company funds to reimburse several personal expenses connected to her. Avery closed her eyes. How many? Enough that the chief financial officer noticed. Avery felt a strange calm settle over her. The anger was still there, but it was no longer controlling her. Why would he do this? Danielle answered carefully. Maybe because he thought nobody would look closely. Maybe because he believed you would never look at all. Avery glanced toward the bedroom door. He was right. Was. Danielle emphasized the word. Not anymore. After the call ended, Avery printed everything Danielle had sent. She placed the pages in a folder and wrote one word across the front. Evidence. Then she heard Caleb downstairs. Avery. His voice sounded unusually gentle. She closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. Upstairs. A few seconds later, Caleb appeared in the doorway. Can we talk? Avery looked at him. About what? Us. She almost laughed. Which part? Caleb sat on the edge of the chair. I know I have damaged your trust. Avery said nothing. I want to make things right. With me? She asked. Yes. She studied his face. And with Sloane. His jaw tightened. There is nothing with Sloane that matters anymore. Avery nodded slowly. That answer told her more than he realized. He was not denying it. He was simply trying to close the subject. Did you love her? Caleb looked down. I do not know. Avery's voice was quiet. You knew enough to lie to me. He looked back at her. I was confused. For 6 weeks. He had no answer. Avery stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the afternoon traffic moved along the street as if nothing had changed. Caleb, do you remember when Sloane first came here? Yes. You told me it was a bad idea. He looked surprised. I was worried. Avery turned around. You were not worried about her. You were worried about me finding out. Caleb's face changed. That is not fair. Maybe not. Avery paused. But I am done guessing. She walked past him and left the room. Caleb remained seated, staring after her. He did not know that Avery had already made one decision. She was not going to confront him again. She was not going to beg for an explanation. She was going to find out exactly how far the deception went. That evening, Danielle sent one final message. It contained a screenshot from an internal company calendar. Avery opened it and froze. There was a meeting scheduled 6 weeks earlier between Caleb, Sloane, and the chief financial officer. The meeting took place 2 days before Sloane asked Avery for a place to stay. And the title of the meeting was not about marketing, consulting, or business. It simply said, Avery, exit plan. Avery read it twice. Then she whispered, What did you two think I would do? She had expected betrayal. She had not expected a plan. Avery did not sleep. The words, Avery, exit plan, stayed on her screen until nearly 3 in the morning. She kept reading the calendar entry, hoping she had misunderstood it. Maybe there was another Avery. Maybe it was a routine business discussion. But then Danielle sent another message. I found the meeting notes. Avery opened the file. Her hands went cold. The notes were brief, but one sentence stood out. Prepare for separation without disruption to company leadership. Another line mentioned the house, the joint accounts, and a possible transfer of certain assets before the divorce. Avery stared at the screen. They had not simply been hiding an affair. They had been preparing for her disappearance from their lives. She called Danielle. They planned this before she moved in. Yes, Danielle said. And there is something else you need to know. Avery waited. The meeting was not just Caleb and Sloane. The chief financial officer was there too. Avery sat up. Why would the chief financial officer be involved in my marriage? That is what we need to find out. The next morning, Avery went to North Star Meridian Group. She had visited the office dozens of times during her marriage, usually for company dinners or holiday events. But this time, she walked through the glass doors alone. The receptionist looked surprised. Mrs. Mercer? Avery nodded. I need to see Mr. Walsh. The chief financial officer? Yes. A few minutes later, Martin Walsh met her in a private conference room. He was in his late 50s, calm and careful with his words. He closed the door. I was wondering when you would come. Avery frowned. You knew I would come? Martin placed a folder on the table. I knew eventually someone would ask questions. Avery opened it. Inside were copies of expense reports, internal approvals, and emails. Why did you approve these payments? She asked. Martin shook his head. I did not approve all of them. Avery looked up. Then who did? Martin pointed to the signature at the bottom of several pages. Caleb's. Your husband authorized the payments himself. Avery turned another page. Why did you not stop him? Martin sighed. I questioned some of them. He told me they were part of a confidential restructuring plan. Avery felt her chest tighten. A restructuring plan involving me? Martin did not answer immediately. That silence was enough. What was he planning to do? She asked. Martin finally opened another folder. Caleb wanted to move certain assets before filing for divorce. He believed you would agree to a clean separation if you thought the company was under financial pressure. Avery stared at him. He was going to make me think I was helping him. That was the plan. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then something caught her attention on the last page. A name appeared beside one of the proposed asset transfers. Redwood Crest Capital. What is this? Avery asked. Martin looked at the page. An outside investment firm. Caleb was planning to move part of the family portfolio through them. Did he? Not yet. Avery looked up. Why not? Martin's expression became serious. Because someone at Redwood Crest refused the transaction. Avery felt the first real sense of relief she had felt in days. Then Martin added, and that person asked for documentation showing exactly where the money came from. Avery slowly leaned back. Suddenly, The financial review made sense. Someone outside Caleb's circle had noticed something was wrong. But before she could ask another question, her phone buzzed. It was Caleb. She answered. "Where are you?" he asked. Avery looked at Martin across the table. "Out." Caleb's voice became tense. "We need to talk today." "About what?" There was a pause. "I know you have been asking questions." Avery said nothing. "Avery, please come home." She almost smiled. He finally knew. Not everything, but enough to be afraid. Avery stood and picked up her folder. "I will come home tonight." "Thank you." She ended the call. Martin watched her carefully. "Are you sure that is wise?" Avery looked toward the conference room door. "Yes." She slipped the documents into her bag. "Because tonight, I want to hear what Caleb says when he thinks I still know less than I do." For the first time since this began, Avery was not walking into a conversation hoping for the truth. She was walking and carrying it. "You knew?" Caleb's voice was quiet when Avery walked into the house that evening. He was standing beside the kitchen island, his phone in one hand and a glass of water in the other. He did not ask where she had been. He did not ask why she had gone to North Star Meridian Group. He already knew. Avery placed her bag on the chair. "What did I know?" Caleb looked at her for several seconds. "You have been talking to Martin." Avery felt a strange calm settle over her. "So you know what I found?" Caleb set the glass down. "Avery, there are things about the company you do not understand." "Then explain them." He took a breath. "The separation plan was meant to protect everyone." She almost laughed. "Everyone except me? That is not what I meant. You planned to move assets before telling me you wanted a divorce." Caleb looked away. "I was trying to prevent a mess." Avery stepped closer. "You had already made the mess." He rubbed his forehead. "Sloan was never supposed to become part of this." Avery stared at him. "Become part of what?" He did not answer. That silence was louder than anything he could have said. Avery pulled the folder from her bag and placed it on the counter. "I know about the payments. I know about the meeting. I know about the asset transfers." Caleb looked at the folder, then back at her. "Who told you?" "Does it matter?" His jaw tightened. "Yes." "Why?" Avery asked. "So I know how much you know." There it was. The answer she had been waiting for. Not concern. Not regret. He was measuring the damage. Avery opened the folder and placed the meeting notes in front of him. "You wrote that I would probably agree to a clean separation if I believed the company was under financial pressure." Caleb sat down. For the first time, he looked genuinely tired. "I was wrong." Avery shook her head. "You were not wrong about me. You were wrong about what I would tolerate." Caleb looked up. "I love you." Avery felt the words hit her, but they did not move her the way they once would have. "Do you?" "Yes." "Then why did you make a plan to erase me?" Caleb had no answer. The room went quiet. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and immediately stood. "I have to take this." Avery watched him walk into the hallway. His voice dropped. "What do you mean the transaction was rejected?" A pause. "No. Redwood Crest was supposed to clear it." Another pause. "Then find another route." Avery looked toward the hallway. She had not heard every word, but she heard enough. When Caleb returned, his face had changed. "The company is reviewing everything," he said. "There could be consequences." Avery nodded. "There should be." Caleb stared at her. "You are really going through with the divorce?" Avery looked at the man she had once planned her entire future around. "I am not divorcing you because you made one mistake." She picked up the folder. "I am divorcing you because you made a series of choices and then built a plan around making sure I would never know about them." Caleb's eyes filled with regret. "Can we fix this?" Avery paused at the door. "No, but you can learn from it." She walked upstairs and closed the bedroom door. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry. Not because she wanted Caleb back. Because she finally understood that the marriage she had been trying to save had ended long before she found them upstairs. The next morning, Danielle called. "Avery, there is one more thing." Avery wiped her eyes. "What now?" Danielle hesitated. "Sloan contacted me." Avery went still. "Why?" "She wants to give us everything she has." Avery stared at the floor. "Everything. Emails. Messages. Financial records. And one recording." Avery's heart began to pound. "What is on it?" Danielle's voice became quiet. "Caleb explaining exactly what he planned to do with you." Avery closed her eyes. The truth she had been searching for was no longer hidden. It was coming straight to her. And this time, she was ready to hear all of it. "I thought you would want to hear this," Danielle said. Avery sat across from her at the kitchen table, staring at the phone between them. On the screen was a recording from Sloan. Avery took a slow breath. "Play it." Caleb's voice filled the quiet room. "Once Avery agrees to the separation, the house stays with me. The accounts can be divided later. I just need her to believe the company is struggling." Sloan's voice followed. "And if she refuses?" Caleb answered without hesitation. "She will not. She hates conflict. She will sign whatever keeps things peaceful." Avery closed her eyes. For a few seconds, she could not speak. Not because the recording surprised her anymore. Because hearing Caleb say those words made 6 years of marriage suddenly feel different. Every time she had stayed quiet. Every time she had forgiven him. Every time she had told herself that keeping the peace was worth the sacrifice. He had noticed all of it. He had counted on it. Danielle stopped the recording. "Avery, you do not have to listen to the rest." Avery opened her eyes. "Yes, I do." The recording continued. Caleb talked about moving assets, protecting his position at North Star Meridian Group, and keeping Sloan close until the divorce was finalized. Then Sloan asked, "What about Avery's share?" Caleb laughed softly. "She does not even know what she owns." Avery looked at Danielle. That sentence stayed with her. Not because of the money, because it revealed how little he had actually understood her. Danielle reached across the table. "You have choices now." Avery nodded. "I know." Over the next few weeks, those choices became real. The divorce moved forward. The financial records were reviewed. Redwood Crest Capital refused to process the questionable transfers, and the company began its own investigation. Caleb lost the position he had spent years protecting. Sloan's statements became part of the legal record. Their relationship did not survive the truth they had created together. But Avery did not celebrate any of it. She had learned that watching someone lose what they valued did not automatically heal what they had taken from you. 1 month later, Avery stood inside her new apartment. It was smaller than the house she had shared with Caleb, but the morning light filled the living room. There were no secrets here. No hidden meetings. No locked doors. No questions she was afraid to ask. Danielle walked in carrying 2 coffees. "You okay?" Avery smiled faintly. "I think I finally am." Danielle handed her a cup. "Do you ever regret helping Sloan?" Avery looked toward the window. "I regret that she chose to betray me. I do not regret being kind." Danielle smiled. "That sounds like you." Avery took a sip. "I used to think being strong meant never letting anyone hurt you." She paused. "Now I think it means knowing what to do after they do." Her phone buzzed on the counter. Caleb had sent one final message. "I wish I could go back." Avery read it once. Then she locked the screen and placed the phone face down. No reply. No anger. No victory speech. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when a person finally stops waiting for someone else to give them closure. Avery walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere across town, Caleb was living with the consequences of his choices. Sloan was living with hers. Avery was living with something different. A life she had chosen for herself. She had opened her home because she believed people deserved compassion. She had stayed in a marriage because she believed love meant patience. Neither belief was wrong. She had simply learned that compassion needs boundaries, and love should never require you to disappear inside someone else's life. Sometimes the deepest revenge is not watching the people who hurt you fall. Sometimes it is waking up one morning and realizing you no longer care whether they do. Avery lifted her coffee, smiled at the sunlight, and whispered, "I am finally home." And this time, she meant herself.